139 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary, with Catherine
and Kristen, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, Kristen.
So, we mentioned it last week, but, so this is our last week with Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. And we mentioned last week that the next book in the series is coming out next month on November 19th, I believe. But it doesn't follow sort of the same characters. We are following one of our side characters, Misha. She is going to become the new protagonist, and it's going to follow her story. So with that in mind, we thought our little preamble today would sort of be on how we feel about books that sort of do that sort of go from, even though they're all set in the same world, sort of function as a series, they skip between main characters.
Yeah.
Because, like, that completely exists as books. Don't ask me which other ones do it, but other ones do it.
Yeah, it's a very common thing in, like, I find no, that's not what I meant at all. In romance books. And I forgive it a lot more in romance books because, like, you'll read a romance book and then they'll set the tone of, like, this friend is clearly going to be the next person. So, like, you're kind of expecting it. And it's just a common, I guess, thing for romance books.
Yes, like, it's like, oh, okay, there's one story with this main character, and then, Nora Roberts does it a lot with brothers.
Yeah.
True story, like...
Yeah, it's just funny to
she
say.
She does, like, starts with one brother, and then the next book is about a different brother, and then the next book is about a different one, and then the next one is... And they all find love, and then they all have big families, and it's all beautiful.
Of course. Yeah, so I think, like, in romance, I don't mind it. And I also like the fact, with a lot of romance books, they make it so that, like, you could read any book in the series, and it's not like the story is progressing.
Yes.
Like, you get a spoiler that a couple ends up together, but if you're reading a romance book, you know that the couple's going to end up together, so it's not really a spoiler. Like, if you read the second book and then you go back and read the first book, you know that the first couple are going to get together. It's about the journey anyway, so I don't mind in romance books.
Agreed.
In fantasy, it's hard.
Yes.
Because, like, I liked A Court of Silver Flames.
Mm-hmm.
But it was it's very different anyway. It's kind of a hard one to pick because it also changes from YA, in quotes, to NA. And it has a lot of swearing and a lot of sex. So it's different than AatSCK anyway. Mm-hmm. But it is jarring to see characters from other people's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole Rhys debacle. And we can also talk about Tower of Dawn, but I think we did that enough before. So I don't think we necessarily need to bring up how much we disliked Tower of Dawn.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't really think of many more books that aren't romance that I've read that really jump protagonists.
Yeah. I can't really either, but, like, it's really hard to think about it because you love your main character so much, mm-hmm. and then their story is over, and, like, there's no guarantee that you'll see them again, that, you know, that the next story, like, what if you're not crazy about the character, like the whole Chaol thing? Like, we weren't crazy about him, and now, like, again, I did like the book.
Yeah.
When I read it. Mm-hmm. However, the mental block of getting over in order to finally read it was hard.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't know, a part of me understands because, like, you have more story that you want to tell, right? Like, you want to tell this side character story. And a lot of times we're like, yes, we want to hear about it. But it's really hard when you know you're going to read something that's in the same world and you're not going to see those beloved characters that you've grown attached to.
Yeah, exactly. I like the idea of Misha because I like her as a character.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like I'm going to want to read this next book, but it's still hard to know for sure.
I know I'm going to want to read it. My issue is I'm going to want to see Oraya and Raihn, and I don't know if we will.
Well, yeah, because of how this ends.
And, well, so I will say that, like, I know that ideally if you're listening, you've read the whole book, so you sort of know how it ends.
Yeah.
But it's the book sets up Misha's sort of her sort of story very well.
Yeah, and that she's going to branch off from the main characters we love.
Yes. And actually, so the official there's like a plot summary.
Oh yeah.
So Misha lost everything when she was forcibly turned into a vampire. Her home, her humanity, and most devastating of all, the love of the sun god to whom she had devoted her life. Now, sentenced to death for murdering the vampire prince who turned her, redemption feels impossible. But when Misha is saved by AatSCK, the bastard prince of the House of Shadow, with a past as brutal as his scars, she's forced into a mission worse than execution, a journey to the underworld to resurrect the god of death himself. Yet Misha's punishment may be the key to her salvation. In a secret meeting, her sun god commands her to help AatSCK in his mission, only to betray him by killing the god of death. Misha and AatSCK must travel the treacherous path to the underworld, facing trials, beasts, and the vengeful ghosts of their pasts. But most dangerous of all is the alluring call of the darkness, and her forbidden attraction to AatSCK, a burgeoning bond that risks invoking the wrath of gods. As her betrayal looms, the underworld closes in, and angry gods grow restless. Misha will be forced to choose between the redemption of the sun or the damnation of the darkness.
Interesting.
Yeah, it sounds really good, though.
It does, but I'm like, the first line of it, I was
I
like,
know.
shit, that's not at all how this book plays it off. This book, they're like, it's all fine.
Yeah.
And now the next book immediately is like, it was never fine.
No.
Hilarious.
So, like,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like there's going to be much involving Oraya and Raihn.
No.
But I want to see them. Like, I want to see them happy. I want to see them thriving.
Yeah.
And, like,
I do too.
but I will, okay, the only thing I'll admit is I don't want to see them if they're not thriving.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
like,
fair.
if they're on the struggle bus because of whatever reason, I don't want to know about that. Like,
Yeah.
only reveal their happiness to me.
Yeah. Well, we spent this entire book talking about how sad Araya's life is. Like, she deserves a fucking bit of happiness. Jesus.
Yeah. But I guess, and like, we know that their path is going to be difficult, especially since we've read the end. So, like, we know their path is going to be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if they are struggling with it, I don't want to know about it.
Yeah. I also, like, I don't know. I feel like you can almost take this book as a completely separate one, maybe. I think the biggest issue I had with A Court of Silver Flames was how much you did see, or how much you did see, like, Feyre and Rhys. I think it was too much.
Yeah.
Well, also, they weren't thriving.
No, they weren't thriving, which is what I don't like that.
Exactly. So it was exactly what you hated.
Yeah, only show me more of the happy ever after.
Exactly. I agree.
Anyway, I guess we should get into it.
So, just a heads up, this is not a spoiler-free zone, and things might get saucy.
So, as we said before, it is our last week with Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. And I'm still wrapping my head around this title. Like, as in, I don't get it at all.
No, me neither. Ashes.
Yeah. Star-Cursed.
He can't go out in the sun, but neither can any of them. Except for Oraya. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Although I did think at the end it was going to be like, woo, he's out.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. So that's
no idea.
We're both still on the struggle bus with that. Anyway, so we're on our last week and we are reading chapters 59 to the end. So where we left off last week was a lot of shit went down. There was a coup on the castle, and Septimus, the bloodborne prince, and Simon, who was a Raihn noble, took over the castle, tried to kill Raihn. Oraya saved him, and they cemented their love for each other and had sex. They got their friends out, they reconvened, got an army together, marched back to the capital to try and take it back.
With so much hope.
So much hope. And then Raihn started to fight Simon and noticed that he had some sort of weird conglomerate on his chest of metal and teeth, and they realize he's been imbued with god teeth. God power. And it is slowly killing him, I think. But we sort of let off on a cliffhanger of Simon letting this pulse of power out that as Raihn is fighting him, that we sort of don't really know what that's gonna do yet. Araya's like in a tunnel below and she's like, we gotta get out. So I'm sure tons of other things happened, but that was sort of the Cliff's Notes version.
Yeah.
Can you think of anything else important that happened apart from them having sex a couple of times?
And them wallowing through shit forever.
Yes.
And us almost vomiting.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's it.
Okay. So we start this week in Araya's point of view. She is running through the tunnel and she just needs to get out, like ASAP. And when she does get out, all she sees is, like, fighting and blood. Which is really unfortunate because bloodborne vampires, they do well with blood.
Yes. Good point.
So she doesn't really pay attention to any of that because she's just more concerned with Raihn. So she just jumps into the air looking for Raihn, and then she's knocked back by a power that she claims is sort of feels like Asteris, which is Raihn's power, but it's stronger and red, not black. So the powers have color, I guess.
I guess, yeah.
So after being knocked back, she starts to fall. Like, and I legit thought that this power made her, like, lose the use of her wings. And I was like, oh my god, it has rendered all of the flying vampires, like, flightless, and they're all gonna land, and they're all gonna die. But no, it just made her unable to fly for a second. She righted herself, and then she was going again. So I'm just like, what was the point of that?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's fine. Then she sees Raihn fighting Simon and thinks that he just looks and feels different. And they're just really trying to reassert that this is, like, not a natural thing.
I also like that she notices it right away, and Raihn did not notice it right away. He was just like, oh, I hate this man.
Yeah. I know, it took him ages.
Yeah.
But, like, every single part of her balks at his presence. But, like, she just goes for it anyway. She's like, no, Raihn is in trouble. And, like, just as Simon is about to, like, kill Raihn, she lands and stabs him through the back with the Taker of Hearts. And, like, that's supposed to kill a vampire. But obviously Simon is no ordinary vampire right now.
Yeah.
So she removes her sword and they fight. And, like, even though she's faster, he is bigger and stronger. And, like, she's pouring night fire out of her. And it has just no effect on him. So then he gets the upper hand. And he's about to strike when Raihn jumps back in to protect her.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess she takes a look around to, like, survey the land and to survey, like, the city of Sivernage, and she sees that it's just a bloodbath and that there are more bloodborne vampires than they thought. So, like, they're getting decimated. Like, they are losing. And Oraya knows that, like, they need to retreat. But she's like, I'm not leaving Raihn behind. And also, she doesn't want to leave without using this opportunity to kill Simon. Because she's like, he's causing a lot of issues for us. I have the chance to kill him now. If we don't do it, then that'll just make a bigger problem for us later. And she's just really frustrated because the thought of, like, ceding her father's castle to these enemies after they'd taken everything from her, like, it sort of gave her that additional, like, adrenaline rush, that rage that she needed to, like, go in and fight him again.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden Raihn is surrounded by Rishon soldiers. So, like, she's like, well, I guess I'm on my own. Like, he's not coming to save me. And then again, Simon gets the upper hand and, like, cuts her shoulder, and then her arm, and then her hip. And then his magic is devastating. And then she's, like, on the ground. She's like, well, I'm gonna die. And I'm just like, I don't understand, like, why give them this, like, oh, I'm so mad. Like, because she did it with both Raihn and Oraya. They both got this rage that made them, like, better fighters, but it didn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
And it's like,
that's a good point.
You're already putting them up to 11 of fighting ability by being like, they, like, went to that next level when they were just so mad and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, if you're already putting them up to 11, where else can they go?
Yeah, there's no higher. But, yeah, I agree with you. Like, I guess it's just making it obvious that you can't kill Simon. Like, they're not going to be able to end him.
I guess.
I don't know. Still.
So, like, she notices that, like, Raihn is, like, I feel like almost that the story read sort of in slow motion at this point. Because, like, she sees Raihn fighting, and he's fighting to come to her. So, like, he's just, like, slashing left and right to, like, get rid of these guys quick so he can get to her because he can see that she's in trouble. And I'm like, how can you fight off 6 guys and still notice what's up with her?
Yeah.
Anyway. But, like, she's thinking in her head, it's gonna be too late. It's not happening. He's not gonna make it. So then, Simon hits her with his magic. And she's in pain everywhere. And then something sharp flew against her, which, like, opened little cuts everywhere. And then Simon staggered back and doubled over. And I don't understand that at all.
Yeah.
Like, was it the force of his own magic sent him stumbling back over the rail?
Did his magic not mix well with the pendant and the... But it's not like that comes up ever again.
No.
So... that doesn't make sense either. I don't know, man.
Me neither. Anyway. So, Raihn, this magic sort of pushes her over the railing. And Raihn reaches for her. But it's too late. And he, like, screams for her. And then she thinks of VIncent and how his love was hidden with sharp edges. And his voice is, like, in her head. And then she sees Raihn leap over the wall to, like, leap over the balcony to fly down after her. And it sort of reminded her of the painting in the castle that we noticed, well, that was described to us in the first book.
And I think it's the only painting that
depicts a Rishon.
Yeah, in the first book, but then it's also the only painting that, like, they didn't immediately get rid of, because obviously if everything turns over, gotta get rid of all the he had shit. So they were like, they did actually keep this painting, so it's still in the castle.
Yeah. It was of a Raihn, like, reaching out for God or something. But I guess at that moment, Oraya is saying, like, no. Like, what's happening here is he is reaching out for her. And then she just blacks out. From what? I don't know. I guess the forceful power.
Or, like, just pain?
Maybe.
Don't know.
So then we move over to Raihn's point of view. So he did manage to grab Oraya, and, like, she didn't hit the ground. So.
Well, like, I guess she's half human, but, like, I don't understand. Would that kill a vampire? Would that even kill her? Like, slamming into the ground, is that enough to kill a vampire?
I don't know. But she's only half vampire, so, like...
Yeah. So,
she must be slightly more breakable.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, so he did manage to save her, and he's, like, freaking out because she's covered in blood. And her heart was, like, beating very weakly, so she's not doing great. And all he thought was that she can't be dead, and she can't die, and he's freaking out. So then he sees Simon drop down. I guess Simon has, like, forgotten that he exists. And he's dropped down to enter into the fight with the masses. And he sort of knows that, like, that'll be devastating for their side, because he's obviously not an ordinary fighter. So he yells at Vale to retreat, to get out as many people as possible, and then he just abandons everyone and just runs away with Oraya in his arms.
Not great.
No. I'm like, dude, I understand you're worried for her, but, like, are you not a king?
Yeah, and nobody calls him out on it.
Ever. No. Everyone's like, yep, that's fine.
Cool.
So he needs to get somewhere where no one is going to look for them. And he remembers the name of a town from a letter he read called Vartana. So he flies there, and it's not that far from town, like the capital, but, like, far enough. But it's a very small place, like, there's nothing really there. So he lands, and there's, like, this couple in the square, and he's yelling at them to find Alia. Like, she's a healer, please find her. And these two people are human. Seeing this vampire land covered in blood, they're terrified. And he's just yelling at them. And then finally some woman, like, comes out and she's like, I'm Alia. Like, shush. Come back to my place. I know who you are. Like, just stop scaring people.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, thank goodness. And then he goes back to her place with her. And Oraya, obviously. So we then have, like, this is another thing. All of these parts, we're on part 6 now, called Full Moon. And I'm like, that's so many parts.
Yeah. I also didn't list them ever when they did the parts. You keep saying them, and I'm like, screw it.
So we go right into an interlude. So we sort of leave Oraya hanging. Is she gonna die? I don't know. I do know.
Yeah, that'd be pretty bad.
Yeah. So it goes back to Raihn. Raihn's past. And the lead up, like, during the Kajari, where VIncent won and then took over Sivernage. So Raihn, like, sort of thinks about how he fed VIncent a ton of intel during the 4 months of the Kajari. And he shared, like, guard schedules, the castle layout, the fortifications, essentially everything to help VIncent, like, pull off this coup. Mm-hmm. However, he never reveals his face to VIncent or his name. Which I actually think is sort of dumb. Like,
yeah.
I don't think it's dumb because of what I don't think it's dumb for regular people. I do think it would have helped him in the long run if Vincent did know who he was. Because when he came back to fight in the Kajari, Vincent would be like, oh, hey, I know that guy.
Yeah, I almost feel the opposite. Like, if you're just a regular Joe Smo, you could be like, hey, give me some money. Because I helped you, now help me. Even though, apparently, it doesn't matter, because he'd do what he promised anyway.
Yeah, so it just, like, I guess, it's sort of, I don't know. He just is he's very adamant about not revealing his face. So that final night, like the night of the last event, he gives Vincent a letter full of secrets in exchange for keeping his friends safe. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, did you give him names? Must have.
Yeah, he must have just been like,
this person, this person, this person.
Kyrus and the Queen.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else?
Is Katura not?
I don't know if she was or not.
Yeah. Misha? No. Misha was after.
She wasn't there, no. Yeah, I don't know if Katura was, like, picked up after as well.
Could be.
I don't remember. We don't really get it in this book, but we might have got it in the first book and I just forgot.
It could be. Or we just might know nothing about Katura. She could be a mystery.
Yeah. I wonder if the third duology is going to be about her.
Be nice.
Yeah.
So he also finally tells the Queen, Nasania? Nezanin?
No.
Nezanin,
yeah.
Nezanin or Nezanian?
Mezzanine, I think.
Okay, Nezanin. I'll take it. So he finally tells her that he's been, like, feeding this information to this guy and, like, plotting the downfall of the Raihn, like, empire, like, the Raihn rule. And she is just horrified.
I know.
Like, he thought she would be, like, impressed and also grateful. And she's actually like, what have you done?
Yeah. Which is, like, wild, too. You're
yeah.
Like, why? Yeah.
Why do you care?
Yeah. Interesting.
I still don't, like, understand her as a character in any way, shape, or form.
No.
Like,
I think...
Like, she's not... I don't think she is a realistic character. I think she's and 100%, she's a plot device.
Yeah, she's a manic pixie dream girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's
just there to further the plot. Doesn't really matter, like, if what she does doesn't make sense for her character or not.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, so she refuses to escape with him. And, like, he tries to convince her and she's just, like, adamant. Like, nope. And then they're all watching the final battle. And when Vincent is about to ask for his wish, she tells Raihn to go, and he does. And Nyaxia is just floating back into the sky, and Raihn is sort of on the outskirts of Sivernage when he, like, looks back at the Moon Palace, and he said he can feel Nyaxia's eyes on him, and he can feel the moment that the power goes up his spine and his wings, but he, like, lies to himself and refuses to admit it to himself. And then he thinks that it would take him 200 years to accept the truth. So, we go back to Oraya's point of view. Like, this is sort of her, after this, like, flashback for Raihn. She wakes up, and when she looks at the ceiling, she feels this sense of nostalgia for, like, the tiny room. And it was almost like she recognized it. And then she sees Raihn sleeping in a chair. And, like, she sniffs. She goes, like... And he wakes up at her sniff.
Okay.
And, like, he just holds her and tells her she can't do that ever again. And then Alya comes in. And Araya's like, oh my god, that girl's so familiar. And then she's like, I think I know you. And Alia's like, oh my god, I didn't think you would remember. And then she drops the bomb that she's actually Oraya's aunt. Aunt, whatever.
Depends how fancy they're feeling.
She's her mother's sister. And Raihn sort of, so like she starts to take care of Oraya. Like, I guess she has some cuts that need to be bandaged. So Raihn tells her about like what happened after the battle as she's being like sort of fixed up. So apparently both sides suffered really bad losses and their force did retreat, but they need to come up with a plan because Simon apparently is going to be coming for them. So she wants to go back. She's like, we need to go back. And Raihn wants her to sort of stay and rest. But she's like, if you were me, would you stay back and rest? And he's like, well, no, but it was worth a shot. And Alia actually agrees that she should stay a bit longer and tells her that, and like it sort of comes around that Alia has a sage's magic, who's one of the gods. Mm-hmm. And only his healing could have helped heal her. Because I guess, like, everyone else has a little bit more rudimentary healing skills. And, like, Asaja's magic is, like, primo for healing.
Yeah.
Oraya then looks at Alia's hands. And a memory comes flooding back of her as a little girl insulting Alia's hands. And she sort of then realizes, like, oh shit, I actually lived with her. And Alia confirms it, but also tells her that, like, she was born in this very house. And her mom actually almost died in childbirth. But Alia was there and helped and used her healer magic and she lived. And then we sort of get a little, like, we get some information about Oraya's mom. That she was an acolyte of Acacia as well, and it was her idea for her and her sister to join and become acolytes. That there weren't many opportunities for humans in Obitrius, and that Oraya's mom wouldn't accept that, and like she still wanted to be ambitious. I think what's her name, Alana? I feel like it's Alana.
Or like
Alana or
Elena, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
So apparently the Alana, Oraya's mom, liked that Acacia was the goddess of lost things, and thought that all of the beings were lost and needed someone to guide them. But she wasn't a healer by any means. Alia was always the better healer, so I guess there's different proponents of her magic that they could tap into.
Yeah, because I think some of it, last week we said some of it was like seer magic.
Yeah.
Too.
Well, so this is the thing. So, like, she wanted to be something grand, and, like, that made her decide to practice seeing. Or, as I called it in my notes, seering.
Oh, I like it.
Yes. And she was like, oh, it might come in handy one day. And then, of course, it did when she heard that Vincent was looking for seers. So she thought that this was sort of the way for her to make something of herself that she always wanted to. So she went and offered herself to Vincent. And Alia just tells her that she fell in love with him and he gave her a purpose, which, like, she sort of always wanted. But Alia didn't know what that purpose was. Like, she knows they were working on something, but she doesn't really know what it was. And that she only ever got, like, bits and pieces of information. And she said it was either that they were trying to restore something that had been lost or create something new. And she was like, after Raihn has told me about the god blood and everything that Septimus was doing, she thinks that that's a likely supposition for them to make. Like, it is likely that what they were working on was probably the god blood thing. But then she actually told Oraya that VIncent, he came to visit once, and she looked, and Alana, I'm saying that's her name, I don't actually remember.
Yeah.
Looked at Vincent like he was the sun, and he actually looked at her like she was the moon. Mm-hmm. So, like, they were in love with each other. Well, as much in love as you can get when you're a heartless, soulless dictator king guy.
You know.
But then Alia says that, like, he looked at her like she was the moon, but he also looked down on their life and on her humanity. And if he couldn't love that about her, then he didn't really love her. And, like, I agree and disagree with this statement, because I agree with it because those are the things that, like, she cannot change about herself. She can't change that she's a human. She can't change what her life has been. So for him to look down on those things, I think that's silly.
Yeah.
But this whole, like, oh, you know, if you didn't love that about her, you don't really love her. But, like, I'm sure there are traits that we all dislike in our partners, but we still love them.
Yeah, I think, like, you can't just blanket statement anything about love.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Anyway, so I just feel like she did, and she wasn't really privy. Now, again, like, it's Vincent, so we can probably safely say that he didn't love her more than he loved his power. But, like, I feel like we can safely say that she didn't know him. So for her to say, oh, he didn't really love her, I don't know if I would agree with that.
Yeah. Narcissists can only love people a certain amount, I guess. But, like, I feel like he loved her as much as he could love somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Oraya asked, like, what changed, like, if they loved each other so much. And my God, Alia told her that her mom left because of her. And I'm like, what? Why did you say that? I feel like that's also a really terrible thing to say. Like, oh, your mom left your dad because of you. Yeah. Like, even if it was like, oh, to keep you safe or anything like that, it's still sort of a dick thing to say.
100%.
Anyway, so apparently she showed up at Alia's door, pregnant, and reassured her sister that Vincent would not come after them. And apparently he didn't for a while. But after so long, his enemies were breathing down his neck, and he went to Selene, but she doesn't know why he left Oraya alive, and, like, Alia doesn't know if he killed her family. Like, she doesn't know that much. Mm-hmm. But she reassures Oraya that she was loved, and, like, she was like, if you didn't know anything about your family, like, I hope you always felt that you were loved. And that sort of pissed Oraya off. She wasn't pissed off at Alia, but pissed off at Vincent, because she's like, no, I didn't feel loved. I had no idea that you existed. I had no idea that any of these people existed. And to know that they thought about me and loved me was something that Vincent took from her. Because he made her feel like he was the only one that cared for her. And when in fact there are these other people in the country that knew who she was and felt like love towards her. Mm-hmm. So then she goes and gives Oraya a bracelet. And it actually matched her onyx ring and necklace. And I totally forgot these two items existed. They haven't...
Well, we only got one of them last week. The necklace was in, like, all the shit that Raihn found around the house. The castle. But it was, like, in his little, like, wedding gift to her. He was like, here are some letters, and here's a necklace that I think was your mother's.
Right.
So, this part, I'm like...
So, like...
What?
What a great coincidence. And like
Yeah.
in my head, I'm like, that ring. When did we hear the fuck about the ring?
I think she's always had the ring since she left. I think we heard more about it in the first book.
Okay, because I totally forget.
Yeah.
Um, so she leaves. So like, Alia leaves to like sort of give Raihn and Oraya some time to chat like privately. Um, and she says, "Oh, I'm gonna go check on dinner." So Raihn tells Oraya that like he still has the pieces of the mirror, so they can still communicate with Jasmine and everybody, and they're currently still counting their dead. And Rain's like, I mean, we could surrender, but Araya's like, hell no. So then they sort of like change the subject a bit, and he actually puts the bracelet on her wrist. And then she feels strange, and all of a sudden a map forms in between her ring and her bracelet.
Wild.
Yeah. So, like, Alia recognizes this as an enchantment and sort of feels that it was like her sister's magic and that it was woven into the metal of the jewelry so that it could only be revealed to the wearer when they were wearing all three pieces. So, what a coincidence.
Yeah. What are the chances?
Yeah. They also figure out that the pendant that Simon is wearing is an activator for other magic. So, like, it's not anything godly itself. It's just an activator for that type of magic. And then Alia says, like, Vincent would definitely have other activators. Like, that is not the only one, guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
But she also says that by forcing and twisting it to work with god magic, it's gonna make it dangerous and ugly and probably kill the user. So I'm guessing that this pendant just amplifies regular magic. And it's not supposed to be used with god magic.
Yeah. I guess that makes sense.
So the map has a little star on it and it actually leads them to some ruins in the middle of the desert. But it's decently close to Sivernage, so that if they decide to go, Septimus and Simon will know and will come after them. So they want to go figure out, like, is this going to be helpful to us?
Mm-hmm.
So Vale actually suggests that they all go to hold off the army and buy Oraya enough time to find the power and hope that it's enough to help them win. So then they spend the day strategizing through the mirror when Alia actually returns with her husband, Jace, and her bestie, Tamara. And they're holding weird weapons. So at first it's kind of like, ooh, are they going to kill her? Because that would be a twist. So they bow and they thank Oraya and Raihn for prioritizing the safety of humans and that they have a contingency of soldiers, like a few hundred only, that would gladly fight beside them if they continue to keep humans safe during their reign. So essentially, you're going to help us, we'll help you.
Yeah.
And she agrees, Oraya agrees to that. Then Jace comes next. So again, this is Alia's husband. He's a blacksmith. And he has...
Convenient.
It is convenient. And he has the remnants of the Taker of Hearts. So she stabbed it into Simon and he, like, disintegrated it. And it's all shattered. And they only have about half the pieces. And she asks if they have... If, like, Alia has experience with imbibing magical weapons, and she does. So they're thinking that Oraya is going to want them to repair the Taker of Hearts, but she asks instead for dual blades. And we could have sort of expected that because constantly we're getting this, like, you know, she grabbed the Taker of Hearts and she was a little clumsy about it, and like her weight wasn't 100%. She wasn't perfect. Like, we got all that.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of glad she's getting the dual blades instead because she really needs them.
Yeah.
So they left the next day from Alya's house, and Oraya has her new weapons, and they leave like sort of ahead of the troops because obviously it's going to take the troops longer to get there. And they're trying to sort of remain undetected as they cross the desert. And they do have to set up camp for a day at the camp. Or a day. They have to camp for a day in a tent. And, of course, like, sexy times ensue. But it's a very intense sexy time. Like, she says that they want to remember each other in case they died. Which is like...
They're making love. They're not just having sex.
But, like, it's also more than that. Like, she's, like, thinking to herself, like, she wants to literally memorize every single plane and angle and, like, blemish on his body. And, like, they're, like, they're doing it missionary, which is wild for her because she doesn't like to be confined.
Mm-hmm.
And they are, like... Oh, no, I forgot what I was going to say.
Doing it missionary.
Oh, right. But yeah, so, like, she doesn't really like doing it that way. It gives her, like, confinement issues. But she just wanted to, like, if for this time she had, like, she really enjoyed it and wanted to. And they were, like, staring intently into each other's eyes. Like, neither of them would, like, close their eyes or blink or anything. Which is weird. And, like, she's thinking to herself that, like, she wants to commit him to memory and, like, savor him like blood. I'm like, jeez, getting graphic there. Then we jump over to Rain's point of view, and they're, like, this is the after they had sex part. So they're laying together, but, like, neither of them go to sleep for a while. Instead, they just lay there. And, like, they're memorizing the cadence of their breaths and the feel of their skin. And, like, Oraya does eventually fall asleep, but Raihn does not. Because he wants to remember what it was to lay next to her and memorize her face. And it's just very, like, very much like saying goodbye, one of them's gonna die sort of a thing.
Yeah. And I did think that one of them would die for a bit.
Yeah. So, he says that, like, doing this reminds him of the night of the Kajari 200 years ago when Vincent won. Because the day before, he held Nezenine in the same way. And he watched her sleep too. And he was really certain that he loved her. But it was never terrifying to love her. So he's deducing right now that it was like a survival mechanism. And that he needed someone to love. But loving Oraya was terrifying. And then he sort of felt stupid for not thinking that what they had was love. And I'm like, dude, you didn't know you loved her already? Like, I thought we'd been through this. But I guess we haven't. But yeah, so I guess he was just saying that, like, the love he felt for Nezenine is so different. Like, he did it to keep himself alive and keep himself, like, humane, we'll say.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas loving Oraya is so different. Like, it's so exciting, but it's also terrifying because he doesn't want to lose this person. So, and again, he says this line next. So, he knew that what they had, or he knew that this whole thing was really his fault, which I don't see, but okay.
Yeah.
But, so therefore he's gonna do whatever he can to keep Oraya safe. And I'm like, what about all the soldiers that you have marching in a battle for you that literally did nothing?
Yeah. And now humans added to it.
That night they, like, fly to the ruins. And they can see their sort of cobbled army in the distance. So they land where the map tells them to. And they get close to the ruins, and then pain shoots up Oraya's hand. And, like, the closer they get to the ruins themselves, the more pain she feels. And she says that, like, it was, like, in her blood, and it was, like, the door was calling to her. But it was all covered up, so nobody else could see it. And I'm like, what kind of magic did Vincent lay down here? Because that's wild.
Yeah. It had to have been something.
So she reaches for the door and realizes that that's not going to work. So then she cuts her hand and puts her blood on it. And she's pulled into a memory of Vincent's. And it's like a very brief image of him feeling small and powerless because he's holding the god blood, and that's how he feels. And the woman next to him looks like a goddess, and he reaches for the door. So, like, so she comes back to the present, and Raihn, like, really doesn't want her to go down into these ruins, but, like, feels like she's being beckoned to go. Like, there's something calling her into this room, and Raihn sort of wants to go with her, but, like, they sort of both know that he can't because he wants to argue with her, but then he sees the Bloodborne army on their way, and apparently it's, like, huge in comparison. And
which, like, did he hide most of his army before? Like, why is it so big now?
I'm wondering if they had soldiers in reserve, we'll say.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Oh, cool. So yeah, I have no idea where they hid them all. I'm assuming they, like, tucked them in the castle and, like, just had some of them, like, you're off duty today.
Yeah.
But, like, she sees, like, they really don't have a shot. So, like, the only shot they have is this, like, last chance, like, this blood.
Yeah, last resort.
Yeah. And, like, she doesn't want Raihn to stay and fight because she knows she's gonna have to fight Simon.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, she doesn't want him to because she knows that, like, Simon almost killed him, also almost killed her. So, like, she knows he's in danger, but at the same time, he's the only one with power enough to keep up with Simon.
Mm-hmm.
So she knows that she has to go down into the ruins. He has to stay up here and fight. And she just tells him to give them hell and not let Simon win. And he tells her he loves her. And then he just blasts into the air before she can respond. And it's like one of those things where you're like, I love you, and then you run away.
Yeah. I think it's what she needs, though.
Yeah. And she's, like, slightly overwhelmed that he just said it and left.
Mm-hmm.
But she's really nervous about stepping foot into the ruins, so she thinks that, like, she feels small and human, but she refuses to be what Vincent made her be. So then she just steps into the darkness of the ruins. So, we go to Raihn's point of view now. Like, he is afraid, but he knows what he has to do. So he flies to Vale and tells him that Oraya is searching and not to let them beyond the lines of the ruins. Like, they have to hold the line no matter what. Mm-hmm. In other words, like, essentially, we all have to sacrifice ourselves for her.
Yeah.
And, like, I do really love Vale in this moment because he was like, I promise, like, nobody will cross that line. Like, he's like, we will hold the line. And it's sort of like, oh, Vale.
Are we assuming that Lilith is not fighting?
No, she is not fighting. Come on.
Yeah.
She's
That's my assumption.
He's got her tucked away somewhere. God only knows where.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Raihn sees Simon, like, flying with his forces, and he knows that, like we said earlier, he would decimate a regular soldier. So, essentially tells all the troops, like, stay away from Simon, he's mine. And that's mostly for their protection rather than his ego.
Yeah.
And then he thinks to himself, well, it's time for a rematch. So then we go to Oraya's point of view. It's pitch black, and she accidentally falls down a set of stairs. And she's like, oh, my tailbone. But
not ideal.
Yeah, when she gets to the bottom, her night, like, she's, like, when she was at the top of the stairs, like, going into the ruin, she says it was so pitch black, not even her night fire could, like, penetrate the black. And I think we're assuming that this was a spell, like, because, you know, if you light up the dark, there should be light. But she says that, like, nothing, like, her night fire was burning, but it wasn't making any light. It was still pitch black. So I'm assuming it was some sort of spell. And then when she fell down the stairs and tried her night fire again, then it could finally penetrate the dark. And she's at this entrance to a circular room, and there's a big column, like, in the middle, and then there are two circular barriers surrounding it, and they're, like, I guess, made out of stone. But they're only as tall as her waist, so, like, theoretically, she could hop over them. Theoretically.
Well, yeah, especially, she should be able to fly over them, shouldn't she?
Yeah. And then she also notices that, like, the entire room is covered with, like, sigils or glyphs or something. And she knows that, like, if you worship Nyaxia and use her magic, you wouldn't use these glyphs. And she also saw glyphs like this in her mom's notes, so she thinks, oh, this must be the work of my mom. And her skin feels, like, itchy, like there's too much blood in the magic. Sorry, not blood. Too much magic in the room. And she understood that this space is not meant for her. But, like, her blood is close enough that it lets her in, but it's still wary of her. So she tries to climb over the first barrier, and she's knocked back. And I'm like, girl, of course you were. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe she even
tried.
Gotta
try something.
I guess.
But yeah, I know what you mean. Like, what do you expect?
Yeah. So she's getting impatient, sort of knowing that Raihn is up there fighting Simon, so she needs to figure this out. And then she remembered that, like, strong magic required sacrifice. So she cuts open her hand and she gives the barrier her blood. And the way she describes it, it's like the magic absorbs it and drank it down eagerly. Yeah. So, like, the wall is, like, absorbing her blood. And I just want to be like, okay, that's enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of thought that it wasn't going to stop.
Yeah.
When I first read this part, I was like, oh, she's dying now. Like, it's going to take every piece of blood she has in her body.
Yep.
Because she's not Vincent.
Exactly.
But.
So, we quickly go back to Raihn's point of view. Simon is, like, heading for the door to the ruins, and Raihn, like, throws himself in between Simon and the door, and, like, then they start fighting. And Raihn lets him fight it on instinct. And actually manages to spear Simon in the wing. And as he turns, stabs him in the armpit, which causes him to moan in pain. Which is, like, something exciting for Simon. Because he's not usually in pain.
Yeah, especially his new weird body.
Yeah. And then he tells Raihn that, like, he's a nobody and would never be him. A.k.a. Neculi. And that was Raihn's biggest fear. Like, that he would become Neculi. So Raihn just told him, like, yeah, you're right. I'm just a turned slave. And he was like, that's all I'll ever be. And that actually distracted Simon enough for Raihn to reach to his chest and pull the metal and teeth out. And I guess that caused a wealth of power. And it caused Raihn to, like, lose his vision. Everything went white. And then, all of a sudden, both him and Simon were falling. So then we go back to Oraya's point of view. So, the minute her blood touched the stone, were pulled into memories. So this is Vincent's first memory. And, like, she's experiencing it as if she's inside of his body. Like, she's not a separate entity. And she thinks that, like, she figures out that it's his first time looking at this place. And he brought Araya's mom here when it was just a cave. And, like, they made it look the way it looks now. And they, in the vision, they have to make the first lock. And he has to imbue it with something of his. Like, more than blood, but like a piece of his soul if he wants it to really work and be powerful. So Araya's mom tells him to think of a powerful memory when he drops his blood on it. And he thinks of killing Neculai and his father and wearing his crown, and those are his most powerful memories. But then he looks at the woman, and that's how she's known, the woman. And he feels desire for her. So he orders her to come to him. And, like, apparently he's so exhausted with this desire, and, like, so much so he can't even think in her presence, and he's, like, going mad. So, like, he ordered her to come here, and then he just kisses her. So it's sort of one of those moments where, like, you think of one thing, like, you're told to think of one thing, and then you accidentally think of something else.
Yeah, and especially in a moment where you're, like, feeding your desires into a spell, I assume. Like, this is not the time.
Yeah. So then Oraya is shoved back into her own mind, and she realizes then that each barrier is a layer in a lock, and she has to undo each one. So the one that she just unlocked is actually lowering into the ground so that it's, like, flush with the ground. And she knows she doesn't have time, so, like, she just wants to be quick. So she opens her wound again and presses it to the second wall. Second memory, she's in Vincent's mind again, and this time he's alone, and he's looking at the finished carvings, and he hates them, and he hates her. And he thinks that this was supposed to be a monument to his strength instead of becoming a weakness. So apparently she called him power hungry, and he called her weak. And he was ready to give her eternity, and she spat in his face. So we're assuming he offered to turn her, and she declined.
Yeah, because it sounds fucking awful.
Yeah, funny.
Also, I would do it. Actually, I don't know if I would.
If the person you're obsessed with and, like, in love with offered it to you?
I know, but I can barely imagine living this life, let alone immortality.
Yeah, but I guess
it's something.
It is something, but I also feel like if the person you were spending your life with also had immortality, like, you would want to spend it with them.
Yeah, but I feel like I kind of wonder if she ever actually loved him. Like, I feel like she was obsessed with him, but I'm like, was she in love with him? Because she got pregnant and she was like, nope, gotta leave. Which also makes sense because he killed his father and etc. But, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So he also could tell that she was pregnant because he could smell it. Back to the smells.
Always.
And he actually thinks that, like, the fact that there's a child out there that is his is a threat because kings die at the hands of their children, and there's, like, one of his out in the world, so he's feeling a little bit paranoid about that.
Mm-hmm.
But then his chest hurts. Like, he's actually quite heartbroken in this scene, and it's very sad, but also very interesting to read about because he's alone in this. Like, he's not alone because Oraya is, like, watching it, but he's alone in the time, and he actually, like, admits things to himself that he wouldn't admit ever in front of another person.
Yeah.
So, like, he's actually ashamed at what he said to her that caused her pain. So, like, he said something not nice. And, like, he actually hates the thought of going home to an empty bedroom and an empty castle. And, like, that's actually quite not sweet because, like, but, like, I don't know. I think that's actually quite nice. Like, that he's showing, like, I don't want to go home to the emptiness.
Yeah. It's giving him more depth, maybe. Like, he's more human. Not to use that word, but, like, he has more emotions than we assumed in the first book.
Right. So he then, like, thinks, like, maybe he should go after her and snip the thread, aka either kill her and the baby or just kill the baby. But she looked in his eyes and asked if she would be safe if she left. If years of love and companionship had earned that. In other words, if I leave, are you going to come after me, or do you love me enough to just continue?
Let me go.
And his response actually was that she was welcome to leave whenever she wanted, and she was arrogant to assume he would go after her. So, I don't know, I feel like that's a good reassurance as any, if you're, you know.
You mean, like, that he loved her, or that he wouldn't kill the baby? Or either, or both.
Wouldn't kill her, the baby.
Yeah.
So yeah. So he knows that, like, him saying that was a lie. And he can't lie to himself anymore. And essentially just admitted that he could never kill her.
Yeah.
So this causes him to think of the dark-eyed former queen that was kind to him, and he hadn't spared her, and he felt regret for that. And I don't I understand that, but I don't see the reference. Like, have we learned about that yet?
Yeah, about he raped and killed Nessanine instead of. I guess we don't get either of their point of views, like, so we don't get the moment where she was nice.
Yeah,
to him,
that's what I mean. How was she kind?
Telling us. This is him telling us that she was kind and he was a dick.
Oh, okay.
I guess. It's just like, it's kind of a bit, it's everything Oraya needs to hear to be able to love him. So it's convenient.
Yeah. So he is sort of like, just decides he's going to shake this off. And he just sort of forces himself to his feet. Because, like, at the heartbreak section, he, like, fell to his knees and he's so distraught. But then in this one, he's, like, forcing himself to his feet and he's like, nope, I should let her go. Like, she isn't worth anything. So then we go back to Oraya and she is vomiting. And I'm assuming it's, like, a blood loss thing, because, like, she's putting her hand on each of these barriers and it's sucking out blood. I can imagine that it's sucking out more each time, and that, I don't know.
Yeah, it can't just be because of the feeling. I don't know.
Yeah. So the second wall is obviously down, so only the column remains. And she's hating experiencing the memories and thought that, like, they would break her. But she has no choice, so she puts her hand on that column too. So then we go back to Rain's point of view. And his wings don't work. So, like, he hit the ground after pulling on the thing in Simon's chest. His wings stop working and he falls. And he hits the ground and something cracks. And he's in a ton of pain. But when he opens his eyes, Nessanine is there. And she asks him, who wins? If you fight him, who wins? And he realizes that Nizanine wasn't strong at all. Like, she was a terrified, lonely woman who was a prisoner in her marriage. And, like, just in general, she was a prisoner. But she also refused to fight because she was afraid. So, she got work to do.
Yeah.
Hang on. So, Nizanine asks him again, like, who wins? And he just thinks, like, maybe not me, but I have to try. So he opens his eyes and he sees, like, absolute carnage on the battlefield. And he's trying to move, but his body is, like, not responding. It is super broken. And he looks over and he sees Simon getting up. And it's like, well, geez, like, nothing can kill this guy. And, like, the thing in his chest is still there. And he's, like, so, like, they're both really bloody and injured. But Simon is walking, which is, like, more than Raihn can say. Raihn is very messed up and, like, broken on the ground, like, can't stand up, can't walk, anything.
Yeah.
However, Raihn, through sheer force of will, manages to stand, and he makes his last stand, and he refuses to let Simon through the door.
Just to keep Oraya safe.
Yeah.
So we go over to Oraya's point of view now, and Vincent is just kind of in front of her, and he's so real that it, like, puts her imaginations of him earlier in the book to shame. So I'm like, oh, it must have been her coming up with it earlier, because we were like, his voice, that's not, you know.
Yeah.
And she thinks, like, he left so much of himself in this room, and he, I guess, says, like, this place was supposed to be his greatest achievement, which you kind of just said, but it's his mistakes. And she thinks of his final words to her, which were that he made many mistakes in the end, but never her. And he says, like, so many mistakes here that he never wanted her to see. And he didn't want her to see this version of him. And she thinks, like, she didn't want to see that either.
But, like, wouldn't you want to see the sort of more soft-hearted side of your father? Like, the side that did love your mother?
Yeah, 100%. And that, like, felt bad for betraying Raihn. Because, like, the queen was nice to him or whatever. Like, I feel like she needed these moments. So I don't really know why she was like, I didn't want to see it either. Because, like...
You needed to, though.
Yeah, so that you can reconcile.
Yeah.
But... So she feels angry because he lied and caged her and kidnapped her. And she says killed her mother. And he asks if she wants to see the memory it took to, like, finalize this place. So she puts her hand forward again, and then they're in Salonay. And we're in Vincent's point of view again, and lately he feels like his enemies are closing in, and he needs to get rid of his weaknesses. And he thinks of his promise to her, because, like you said, that's all he calls her. And he's been having dreams lately of him killing his father, and then of a silver-eyed boy killing him, because he assumes that he had a son, and that his son is going to kill him. So he thinks he just has to kill the child, and then he gets to the house, and it's basically his point of view of the scene that we saw in the first book. But she is the only living thing in the rubble, and she looks like her mother, but she has his eyes. And he reaches out for her, and she bites him. And he expected to kill her, but he immediately just, like, loves her so much. And he's immediately so proud of her fierceness, and he thinks it's incomprehensible that his father threw his newborn brother out the window. And he just decides in this moment that he's going to raise her instead of killing her. So we go back into Oraya's head, and Vincent says, like, he tried. And she knows that he means it and is admitting fault, but she says it wasn't enough and that he failed her. And she says, like, he loved her and now he's dead. And he kind of starts to fade and says, like, this is what you came for. And then the pillar, like the main pillar, opens. And she sees a vial inside, which contains, like, multitude of different colors, like, kind of looks like a galaxy thing inside the vial. So it's, like, we know it's the god blood.
So it's one of those, like, shots that's got glitter in it.
Yeah. I drink it. Vincent says, like, they gave up so much to distill it, but they gained so much too. And she asks how to use it. And he says, like, she can drink a bit of it or she could put it in her blades. But her blood is the catalyst. And this blood will make her more powerful. And she asks, like, what else? Like, she knows there's got to be a downside. But he just says, like, he can't say. So she, like, reaches for it and takes it and then ends up, like, screaming in pain because, of course. And she tells Vincent she loves him and he basically disappears.
Oh.
So we go to Rain's point of view again and he and Simon are still fighting like hell and blood is falling from the sky so they can't even tell which blood is theirs and which is from the people fighting above them. And his pain is so constant that it's just like something he's just decided to ignore. And he doesn't know how he's not dead yet, but he's decided that he's going to take Simon with him if this is when he dies.
Yikes.
Right? So Simon hits him and he loses, like, falls back and loses consciousness for a bit. And he can barely move out of the way when Simon goes to attack him again. And his sword arm stops working because his body is completely exhausted. But Simon is still coming for him. And he's missing an eye at this point. Like, if he were a normal vampire, he would completely be dead. Mm-hmm. But then, out of the corner of his eye, Raihn sees Oraya running out of the ruin. And he can see that she's, like, full of magic. And that it's not just hers. He can see, like, a different kind of magic around her hand. And knows, like, that's got to be the god blood. But then he sees that Simon realizes the same thing. And he, like, lets go of Raihn to go, like, after her. Raihn is so proud of her, and they lock eyes, and he gives one last push of magic and strength and goes after Simon, because he's afraid Simon is going to go after her. It is sweet. But Simon obviously fights back, and is, like, stabbing Raihn everywhere. Like, it's not good. But Raihn pushes his sword into Simon, and, like, just keeps pushing it in there. And finally, Simon stops. But so does Raihn. And he can't move. And then Oraya pulls Simon off of him. And Raihn can't hear what she's saying. And he can't say anything to her because he's so far gone. But he wants her to know it's okay. And he's like, I think he's against a pillar. And Simon was just, like, pinning him there. So he, like, tries to straighten up, but he just falls to his knees. Like, this is not good. And then everything just goes dark. So we go over to Oraya's point of view now.
It's funny how, like, their positions are reversed. Because, like, in the last battle, like, just shortly ago, she was the one that was on death's door. And he was like, no, you can't die. Yeah. And now
that's literally what she said. Yeah, that's true. It's kind of like, I guess in the first book too, like, they each come to each other's rescue and, like,
they contribute.
Yeah, it's not like him always saving her. They save each other. So yeah, Oraya thinks, like, she came out and the battle was horrifying, but nothing is as bad as seeing Raihn here, barely breathing. And he swore to her he would never betray her, and losing him would be the greatest betrayal. And she refuses to let it happen again. So she puts her blood in his mouth and, like, expecting it to, like, heal him a bit, but it just, like, pools at the side. And Simon is still next to them, and he's stirring.
Like, chop off his head now while you got a chance.
I know. I'm like, what? How is he still alive? It's wild. But she starts thinking, like, she could use this god blood, and she could end this battle, and she could kill Septimus, and she could kill Simon, and she could be feared by everybody and, like, keep rule because of it. But she knows that that would be destruction, and destruction isn't going to save Raihn. And she kind of thinks, like, when Vincent died, she just wished that she could have a piece of him. So she starts to think, like, maybe someone who loves the god would want his blood. So she looks to the sky, and it's turning, like, at the Kajari, which means, like, the gods are watching. So she yells to Nyaxia to offer her her husband's blood. And at first nothing happens, and Simon is still, like, moving around. And she just starts to plead. And then Nyaxia appears. And everything around them stops.
Amazing. I love when goddesses come to visit.
Me too. Nyaxia just asks what is happening here, and she is immediately pissed. And she asks, what is this atrocity? And her power, like, shakes the earth so much that, like, Oraya throws herself over Raihn to protect him. Simon gets to his knees and, like, bows to Nyaxia and says, my goddess. And she just, like, teleports to in front of him, and she rips the pendant and teeth out of him, and she, like, just kills him.
Just like that.
So
thank God someone had to.
I know, but I guess it was the whole, like, not a vampire, I guess I was going to say human, but, like, none of the vampires or humans could have killed him. It had to be a goddess. But she asks who did this. And then she says, my love, look at what you've become. And I'm like, I wish Oraya had said Septimus did this, because maybe Nyaxia would have gone after Septimus and done something. But she looks at Oraya then and asks, how did this happen? Her own children using her husband's body parts for their pathetic games. And, like, how it's an incredible disrespect. And Oraya agrees and says that she's returning his blood. But then when Nyaxia reaches for it, she moves her hand away.
Yikes.
You're like, that's dumb. Oraya asks for a favor. And she tells Nyaxia, like, she knows the blood is hers. She's just appealing to her heart. And she wants a Coriatis bond with Raihn. And she thinks it's ironic that she wants one now. Because all along that was her plan. Because she wanted one with Vincent. But now she wants one with her enemy. So that's like... Ugh.
Yeah. I also found it, like, really funny that she was very much like, here, you want this blood? I'll give it to you. Actually, I need a favor first. Yeah. It's like, how dare you ask a favor of a goddess?
And she was
really pissed about it.
Like you would be. She's like, no, that's mine. Nyaxia, like, notices Raihn for the first time then, and says, like, much has changed since the last time that Oraya begged for his life. And Oraya pleads, and Nyaxia, like, takes her face and says she told her a dead lover could not break her heart, and she didn't listen. And she should have left the love then when it was beautiful and much less painful. But Oraya says, like, it's not as beautiful as, like, love that lives.
Yeah, like, she's suggesting that, like, she should not have brought him back after the Kajari.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, you should have let him die back then.
She advised her in the first place that he was going to break her heart if she brought him back. Mm-hmm. And he did, but they're in love still.
Yeah, they've gotten over it.
Yeah. But Nyaxia says she's too young to see the ugliness of love decay. And Oraya tells her that, which I don't think this was her place to say anything at all, but Oraya says that, like, her love would have bloomed if Alaris had lived. It wouldn't have withered. And I'm like, she's clearly not dealing with this well. Maybe don't tell her her life would have been amazing if her husband didn't die. Like, obviously.
And also, like, why are you assuming, like, you don't know her, you don't know him. Like, you literally only know them from legends. You don't know who they are as people. But, like, also to make
Yeah.
the assumption, like, oh, don't worry, your love wouldn't have withered. It's like,
Yeah.
thank you? Like...
That's not comforting or helpful.
No.
Ugh. Nyaxia tells her that she can't let them be together because they were born enemies. And Oraya just realizes that Nyaxia doesn't want to stop her children from fighting. And it makes her furious. But Nyaxia tells her that, like, she's giving her a victory again. Like, she's, like, the battling behind her is stopping. She's going to be queen. Like, isn't that enough?
Yeah.
But it's not. Which I understand, too.
But, like, for most of the High Edge and the Raihn, that would be enough. You know what I mean? You're being given the opportunity to rule. So, like...
the crown.
Yeah, so that should be enough for most people. But...
yeah.
It's a bit wild that, like, she's like, oh, I want my children to fight over me. And I'm like, why?
I know. I kind of wonder if there's going to be, like, a backstory about the gods with, like, more information. Because, like, I don't understand why the Bloodborn were cursed. And I don't understand why they fight for the House of Night. So Oraya asks how to save him. And Nyaxia's like, well, he's basically dead. But she says, like, the Coriatis bond would save him, but she can't be the one to give it to him. And she just says, Oraya of the Nightborn, treasure that flower, and no one will be able to hurt you again. And then she just leaves. And obviously takes the blood with her, because it's hers.
Mm-hmm.
Oraya, like, doesn't care that Simon's dead and that the Raihn are retreating. She's just angry. And she refuses to lose him. So she calls out to her mother's goddess. Yeah, that's what the audiobook said it like, so that's how I spelled it.
It's actually quite helpful.
And she says, like, in the name of Acacia's acolyte, her mother, Elena, I'm not sure what her name is, or how to say it. But Acacia ends up appearing, and she's terrifyingly beautiful, and she has, like, 6 wings, and each one show a different fate. And she has, like, threads of fate that dangle from her fingers. And Oraya sees, like, a glimpse of her past, present, and future that blur by too fast for her to be able to tell what it's happening.
Yikes.
And I'm like, it seems wild. But, Acacia tells her not to be afraid and kneels in front of her, and she touches Oraya's face, and she understands, like, why Oraya asked her to come just by touching her. And Oraya asks for the bond and offers Acacia anything, and Acacia says she's, like, protective of those who walk into the unknown with her, even if it is to questionable ends, like what her mother did. And Acacia asks if Oraya understands the gravity of asking this. Like, Nyaxia is the only god/goddess to have ever given these bonds. And, like, Acacia's followers have obviously begged to save their lovers before, and she hasn't helped them. So why is Oraya different? And at first Oraya thinks, like, she isn't. But then she says, like, he could change the world for the better. And we're thinking about, like, he cares about human lives, which is so much different than everybody else. And she basically says that exactly to her. She's like, the world could be so much better for your acolytes.
Yeah.
Like my mother, with someone like him. Acacia says, like, Nyaxia was right. If he lives, it's going to change the future of the Nightborn. And Oraya says it would end millennia of warfare. And Acacia says it would come with its own issues. And Oraya says, like, they'll face them. They'll face them together. Mm-hmm. And Acacia says, if she does this, will Oraya swear to fight for what is right in this world and the next, against great opposition? And Oraya says yes.
Ugh.
Of course.
I just feel like she's setting herself up to, like, be I don't know, like, it's like she's setting herself up to be, like, the savior for the world, or, like, setting herself up to, it's like she's agreeing to fight in this huge battle. You know what I mean? Like, bigger than the one that she's already in.
Yeah, exactly. Which is weird that there isn't another book from, like, in her point of view kind of thing. So then Acacia says, like, she will be under her protection as a child of her acolyte, and he will be too as her heart bonded, which is an interesting word that I'm assuming means mates. But she says Nyaxia will not be happy about it, and one day she will bring a great reckoning, and I guess Oraya and Raihn will need to face the displeasure. So Oraya obviously agrees. But I'm like, they have to have another book about them if something like this is going to happen, a great reckoning.
Well, this is it, yeah. So it's like, how is this the last book for them if they're going to face this, like, huge, like, world-altering, we're going to say, sort of, seems like, thing.
Yeah. And, like, if it's their kids, I don't really want it.
Nope.
So, that'll be something. So, anyway, Acacia says then, like, this will be painful, and immediately it is. Acacia, like, reaches for Oraya's chest, and Oraya just thinks back to her vows that she didn't really mean when she had to say them, but I can't remember, did she actually just not say them? But she says them now, like, I give you my body, my blood, my soul. And she means it. And Acacia pulls from Oraya's chest and puts it in Raihn's. And she binds their hearts, their souls, and powers together until they die. And Oraya says, I give you my heart, over and over and over to him.
Yeah, because he's dead.
And then yeah. So he needs all of this from her. So I guess she just wakes up and she's in her room. And I'm like, so they both just passed out in the battlefield and somebody had to, like, come by and scoop them both up.
Yeah, and bring them back to their their castle.
Yep. Which is theirs again somehow. And we're like, okay. But everything feels different inside of her. And she feels like her insides are rearranged, and she feels stronger, like, power-wise. But she also feels weaker, like some of her soul is outside of her body. And we're like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. All she can think again is Raihn, because, like, obviously he was dying. And there's a chair and plates next to her bed, like someone was sitting there, but just left. So she gets up to find him, but she, like, topples back over, and she feels like she's witnessing the room from another angle and thinks she must have hit her head. And I'm like, is this Raihn realizing where she is and she's seeing it? Or, like, realizing she's awake or something?
That's what
really...
I think it is.
Yeah. But then it doesn't seem like their power is that much a bit later, so it's kind of interesting. But she knows exactly where he is, and she finds him, and she's just like, holy shit, he's alive, and they just hold each other, and he says, so you missed me, and she just says, I love you.
Aww.
Which is cute. And she feels his shock, and then contentment, because, like, now they can feel each other's emotions. And he says, good, because now you're really stuck with me. And he says that he loves her. So they go into his room, and she says, like, their heartbeats are aligned. So, like, his speeds up and hers slows down, and it's, like, really strange. I'm like, that's interesting.
I like it, though.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of Chaol and Yrene Towers in a way, but, like,
yeah,
the
joining them together, like, entwining their lives.
Yeah. So she just looks him over, and he's covered in scars, and she sees on his chest he has her air mark. And, like, they go look in the mirror together and, like, look at their fronts, and they both have an ear mark there. And then she turns around and looks at her back, and they have his air mark on their back. and she thinks like they really have combined the airlines. But to see her back, they had to like pull down her tank top. So then Misha like barges in, and she's like, "What the fuck? Lock the door if you're gonna take your clothes off." And it's just kind of funny.
So like, does this mean that? I guess I never really thought of it because I thought that maybe if they had kids, one of them would still be the high edge heir and one of them would be the Raihn heir. But like, the way that they're insinuating it sort of makes it seem like no. If they have a child, it's gonna be one child. It's gonna be both.
Yeah. I kind of took it like that too. That like it's forever merged and like they're both heirs.
Well, that's fun.
Which, yeah.
That's fun for them.
Yeah.
Nyaxie is definitely pissed.
Oh my god, so pissed. So Raihn's point of view now, and he thinks like the bond is odd because he's constantly aware of like Oraya's state and emotions. But even without the bond, he'd be able to tell that right now she's pissed. So they're in a meeting room with Katurah, Misha, Vale, Lilith, and Jasmine. And they're trying to, like, figure out where Septimus is, kind of. Katurah says, like, they've checked everywhere in the Nightborn Kingdom, and that, like, the Bloodborne fled as soon as Nyaxia showed up.
Which...
Like, they...
Sorry, continue.
No. I assume it's because, like, she cursed them, and they were like, Goddess is here, I don't want to be in the line of fire.
I don't know, I just found this part really annoying. Like, it was just such a convenient way to get them, like, to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And I didn't like it.
And, like, I just don't like that it's not tied up.
Yeah.
Like, what is he going to do? But it's going to have to be in a different book with a different protagonist. I don't like it. So yeah, and then by the time, like, all the fighting stopped, Septimus had disappeared. And they also haven't heard anything from the House of Shadow about the prince being killed, but their plan is to blame it on Simon since he's dead. Which, like, is smart, and I don't understand why that didn't work. But okay.
Yeah.
So Katurah's...
But it obviously...
Right?
Like, it obviously doesn't, because...
Exactly.
Poor Misha.
I know. That's why I was surprised when you read that. Katurah says, like, they found someone else in the latest raid that Raihn may be interested in. And then we kind of, like, time jump again, and Kyrus looks horrible after hours of being questioned by Katurah and Vale's men. And Kyrus says, like, he told them everything. And then Oraya walks in, and he's afraid of her. And he asks if they're there to execute him, but Raihn says that Katurah, Vale, and Oraya voted to kill him, but he wanted to see his face when the man he betrayed saved his life. And we're kind of in Raihn's head for a second, and he knows, like, Kyrus did this out of fear. Like, he did it because he was afraid that Simon was going to win anyway, and he would have been made a slave again, so he, like, chose his side.
Yeah, he just picked the wrong team.
Yeah. Kyrus basically just says, like, he deserves to be executed, and Raihn says he agrees, but he says he thinks he'll be useful one day. So they're just gonna lock him up until he decides that he's useful again. Okay. But then Kyrus says, well, he thanks him, and Raihn's like, don't thank me for this. But Kyrus says, like, Septimus is planning something big, and he says he doesn't know what, it's just a feeling. But Raihn says they'll be ready. Like, of course they will. So we go over to Oraya's point of view now, and she's getting dressed in, like, a dark purple/black dress that shows off both of her marks, and she looks like a queen. And it's been a month since the battle, and the traitors have been sentenced, and the Bloodborne were expelled, and the rebellious nobles were disposed of.
Woo!
And
they did
right?
it all.
Love it. They did everything they were supposed to. But tonight is the first festival since the end of the war. So Raihn shows up and whistles that she's hot, and their outfits match, of course, and he says she looks too good to be this nervous. But she says whenever she's looked this good, something terrible happens.
And
which I just love because it's true.
I also love it. I like that they can joke around about it.
Yeah, me too. She can tell that he's nervous too, but they kind of like comfort each other. And then Katura shows up and tells them it's time. So they go to the balcony of the castle, where he literally was almost killed, I guess, a month and a half ago now, maybe longer. And they actually decided to like let humans into the outer circle of the castle grounds for this festival.
I love how nonchalant she was like, we even let some of the humans into the very outer reaches of the castle.
Yeah.
It's like, no. You didn't let them join in the festivities. You're still very much a classist society. You're just... Ooh, you're letting them step into the outskirts of the city. How kind of you.
Yeah, it's something. So they walk out and they're announced king and queen of the House of Night, and everyone bows. And Oraya thinks like she saw VIncent perform this rite before, so it's a rite to Nyaxia. So she like snuck out to see it because VIncent never would have let her. But there are 3 offerings, and it starts with wine to thank Nyaxia for her abundance for the year that passed, and ask for abundance in the next. So they swirl their wine, and it raises from their glasses like an eel and just like goes into the sky. And then the second offering is a bone of an enemy, so they use one of Simon's finger bones. And it's, of course, to appreciate her protection. And Raihn uses his like asterisk to disintegrate the bone into the wind. And then the third offering is blood. So they cut both of their hands and they put their palms together. And the blood sacrifice is a sign of their loyalty. And we're like, oh shit, this is obviously going to go badly. And normally, Oraya thinks like Nyaxia takes the blood herself. But for some seconds, like nothing happens. And Oraya starts to think like she's just going to make it look like it's happening. Because they have enough magic to do that. But finally their blood rises, and Oraya looks up and she thinks of Acacia's saying that Nyaxia will come for a reckoning. So like, that's not great.
They think she's gonna betray them all.
Yeah. But it also makes me wonder if like Acacia is the one that took the blood up instead of Nyaxia, because she said that like they're loyal to her now. But who knows? So we go to Raihn's point of view now, and like they all walk around and talk to the important people, and the night is going well. And then after, he goes to find Misha, and he knows that she's either going to be near food or flowers, and she's in the garden. And Raihn tells her to be careful because many people are fucking in the maze of flowers. And Misha says she's surprised that he isn't one of them, and he says he's not one of them yet. And she says the evening's going well, but she's like avoiding his eyes. So he asks what she's hiding. And she says she wasn't going to say. And he asks who. And then she realizes she fucked that up by admitting. And he asks what the hell is wrong. And she says she didn't want to do this here. And she tells him she's going to go away for a while. And he asks where, and she just says anywhere. And he says they've done it already, like they've traveled. And if this is about the House of Shadow Prince, he won't let anything happen to her. And she says she knows that. But like, obviously that's not what happens. She tells him that she was never good at staying, even before she was turned. And that's why they worked so well together. But now he has a home. And he tells her it could be hers too, but she says it isn't. And he asks why she told Oraya, and she said it was easier because it's always been them together, her and Raihn, and she didn't want to see him make the sad face. And he says he'll always support her, and this place could be her home, and he'll always be there for her to come back to. So they have a few weeks before she's going to leave.
Yeah.
And she hugs him and just says thank you. And then she kind of just walks away. But that's obviously
the setup.
Yeah, the setup for part of the setup, because I honestly, when I read this originally, I didn't think that it was going to have anything to do with the Prince of the House of Shadows until you read it tonight.
But, like, I don't understand. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter. But, like, I guess it really doesn't matter what I understand about it. It's going to be something completely different. And, like, obviously they're like, don't worry, we'll deal with it. We'll blame it all on Simon. Like, and then I'm assuming she must have a crisis of conscience and be like, no, I'm going to pay for this because it is my fault. And, like, I did do this. But, like...
Or does Septimus betray them?
That's it. And, like, do we get a little bit of Raihn and Oraya at the beginning of the book before she leaves? Or is it going to set us up right when she's already departed?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. And I completely changed my mind as soon as I heard what the book was actually about. So, like, now I'm even more confused.
Well, we only have, like...
a month? And 4 days?
Oh,
well.
No, we only have, what?
No. I can't remember.
What day 1, 2, 3... A little over 3.5 weeks left before we find out.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
So.
I should order that book. Yeah. So Raihn takes a second to himself, and then he decides he needs to go find Oraya. And he just turns a corner, and she's there. And he sees how powerful she is. And he says, like, he found Misha, and she immediately understands and asks if he's okay. And he says, like, Misha is her own person, and if that's what she needs. But obviously, he's also sad. And she asks if he wants to go somewhere more fun, and he says, fuck yes.
I love
how
they both still hate this. Like, you could be ruling for hundreds of years.
I know. This is like weeks, a month into it. You have quite a long time, especially if nobody's gonna, like, if there's no warring families anymore, because they put the two heirs together, like, yeah. So we go to Araya's point of view now, and they went to the bar and got beer in, like, all of their finery, and just, like, took their beers and went to a rooftop.
And it was the human bar that they went to. Like, they didn't just go to some, like, random vampire. They literally went to the human bar that they always go to. And if all the humans were like, oh my god. They had their crowns on and everything.
It's something. I'm like, you should have just, like, paid someone to go in and buy you a few.
Yeah.
Like, you're a child. So yeah, Oraya says, like, the beer's grown on her, and he says it's because of the bond. She's developed good taste. And it's just kind of a cute moment.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. And she just watches him and thinks of, like, the first time they drank together and how she had planned to kill him that night. And now I just love it. I love how bloodthirsty she was in the first book. And he would have let her kill him in that moment in the first book. So, like, I just love it. But yeah, she thinks of, like, how he means so much to her now, and it's scary. And he looks at her and asks what she's thinking. And she asks if he ever gets scared, which, like, goes against everything she's ever been taught. Like, she's not supposed to be vulnerable. But he tells her everyone feels afraid. And she thinks, like, she's lost everyone she's ever loved. Her father, her mother, her friend from the first book that was, like...
The old lady.
Yeah.
Old, not old, but, like, oldish.
Older, yeah.
I love how that's her list.
Yeah, it's that her life is sad. So, like, the love she feels now is terrifying because it's, like, easy, and she's afraid something will come and rip it away, or she'll destroy it herself because she doesn't know how to do this. And she tells him, like, it feels like a trap, and he says happy, like, and he just says it's happiness. And he says he also has been, like, fighting his entire life, too. And he said he's terrified every time he looks at her because she has his heart and he has hers. And giving that much love is scarier than any bond.
And to give someone the power to destroy you, and, like, it kind of makes her realize, like, she can understand why Vincent never actually let himself get that close to someone. But I'm like, he almost did.
Yeah.
Because when her mother left, he was a bit destroyed. But, like, she kind of says there's also so much safety in it, which is, like, the ultimate paradox, which makes sense for them. They're, like, human, Raihn, and Hiaj, slave and royalty. So there's, like, so much to them as a couple that, like, the fear and the safety together just makes sense.
Sure. Can I just say, though, she's saying, like, giving that much love is scarier, and, like, Vincent never did, but, like, didn't he when... Because he said, like, when he saw her, he instantly fell in love with her, and he loved her so much. Did he...
I thought he
did he show it? No. But, like, he still did love her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, like, his love for her sort of did destroy him.
Yeah. I think you're right. So I don't really know. She should feel love that he loved her, even though obviously it's hard when you have a parent like that. But yeah, I think he did.
Still not a good guy, but, like, at least he loved his child.
Loved her the best he could. Yeah. So Raihn says he knows that they'll have to fight, but it'll never be alone, and that counts for something. And she just thinks, like, that counts for everything. The sun is starting to come up, so she says they should go. But he says that they should wait, and she should enjoy the sun, and he'll move back into the shade, and it won't kill him. And then they'll go back to the apartment and make love for hours. And
I found this scene a fake out.
Yeah.
Because I sort of expected him to be like, oh, like, because they had the Coriolis bond, I sort of expected, like, oh, like, sun to shine on him and him realize it doesn't burn me anymore because of my bond with you.
100%. That's exactly what I thought was going to happen.
That is not at all what happened.
No. And I was so excited because he
loves
the
it
sun
so much.
It made me sad, but I feel like it could still happen. Maybe it happens as soon as the book ends and we just don't get that moment.
Can we just say it does?
Yeah, we'll pretend until we're
otherwise
told differently. So the sun comes up and she, like, walks towards it, and she thinks, like, she used to hate it because it marked how she was different, because obviously vampires can't go out in the sun, and she could. But now it seems stupid to have hated it. And she says, it's something, isn't it? And he agrees, but she looks back, and he's not even looking at the sun.
Of course he isn't.
So she asks if he feels it, and he says he's not sure, and tells her to come here. So she walks over to him, and then his hands are all over her, and he kisses her shoulders, and he says yes, he thinks he can feel it now. And she thinks her husband, her ally, her lover. And they kiss, and she whispers, I feel it too. It's quite the cheesy ending. But...
Do you know what? My only issue is that, like, and I say my only issue, not actually my only issue, but, like, my most significant issue with this entire book is how quickly she went from, I don't love him, I don't trust him, every time I look at him or think about him, I think of him killing my father, to all of a sudden, oh my god, if he dies, like, my life is over, I need to bond myself to him for all of eternity so that he survives. Like, it just went from 0 to 100 really, really fast.
Well, and it's just interesting, because, like, last week we had a moment, and she kind of, I thought, reconciled all of the pieces of Vincent. And she was like, I understand that he is good and he is bad, but he's my father and he loved me in his own way. Like, I thought she had that moment last week. And then this week she has that moment again, and I'm like, I thought we already did this. Like, I already processed this for her. But then her relationship with Raihn is almost the opposite, where I feel like there isn't as much processing.
It's like she didn't reconcile anything. It's like...
Yeah, so it's just really weird.
Yeah, it's like 1 week she's like, I want you, but every time I think of you killing my father. And then all of a sudden it's like, let's make out.
Yeah. Well, like, the first time they had sex, this book, she was like, I hate you.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a whole lot of book between that and I love you this week.
It's weird.
So yeah. Yeah, it is. I still like the book, and I like them as a couple. Like, obviously we knew they were going to make it, but...
How do you feel like, would you rather the first one or this one?
You can't pick the first one, because it's not a happy ending. But I did like, I liked that it was structured. Like, obviously, if there's a competition, you know there's going to be this many things that they have to do. Like, I knew going in what was going to happen in the book. Whereas this one, I was like, they're going to go battle, and then they battled and lost insanely, and then they went and battled again. And I was like, oh, I don't know where this is going at all.
Yeah, it's true. It was very much like, all over the place. Like, what is happening now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have a one that you preferred, or?
I mean, I sort of liked the first one because it was more simple. You know what I mean? And, like, I say simple, like, even though there was all this stuff with, like, the 3 different clans of vampires, and the Hajj versus the Raihn, and, like, Nyaxia, and her Alaris, and all these other gods, it felt like a very predictable book to me until the very end. Sort of the way you said, like, you sort of knew whereabouts it was going. So I liked that. And I also liked the story of how they fell in love. Because I don't care what you say. They fell in love in the first book. Yeah. So, like, I liked that. I do like this one, but it felt so much more like flying by the seat of their pants political stuff.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge political lover.
No. So. Even in fantasy, we don't like politics.
No. And it seems like a lot of books end up going there, and I'm like, why? Let's not.
Just have them rule the kingdom, and everything is fine.
Yeah. Why
not? Anyway, so I guess if that's it for final thoughts, we're gonna wrap it up for the week. So if you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions, please reach out to us by email at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com, or on Instagram or Facebook at Coffee and Co-Read, and coffee.coread on TikTok.
So next week, we're going to be reading a new book, and Kristen's going to be finishing it for the first time ever. Yay! We're going to be doing Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. We're going to be reading chapters 1 to 12. So make sure to follow along, and if you're enjoying our chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you get our content. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you on the next page.